This conference will now be recorded.
In yesterday's session, we were discussing about the past and present of application deployment approaches. We were discussing about what is physical machine, what are the problems with the traditional deployment that physical machines, what is virtualization and what is virtualized deployment and what is containerized deployment. With that background, let's understand containers, containerization or containers. Containerization platforms or containerization softwares. So containerization, what is the meaning of containerization? Using containerization, we can deploy or we can build, we can containerize our application deployments. In simple words, we can build and ship, we can build and ship our applications. We can build, ship and run applications as a containers. We can containerize our applications, containerize or containerization. We can build and ship our application as a containers. So what is container first? What is container in terms of IT, in terms of software? Application container, let's say. I can say container or application container. So container, what is container? Container contains, as I already told, container contains everything which is required run application or software. Basically, application is nothing but a software which contains everything which is required to run a software, like application code, comma softwares plus libraries, whatever libraries which is required, comma configurations, comma environment variables, etc. So if I am building my application as a container and if I am deploying my application as a container, do we get a consistent environment wherever I deploy that container, whether it's in local laptop, whether it's in a on-prem server, whether it's a cloud server? Will I have a consistent environment wherever I run that container? It is like a box. Already you packed everything in the box. Wherever you carry that box, will you have all the things, whatever you packed under that box, whether you carry to your home, your office, or somewhere else, you have same thing, right? So similarly, you packed your application as a container, your application code, your application softwares, configurations, environment, you packed as one package, you packed under one box. If you deploy that package, if you deploy that box in local laptop or data center server or cloud server, wherever it is, do you have a consistent environment? If that application, if that container works in your local laptop, it should work in other environments, other servers also. So to build these containers, to build these containers, to ship these containers or to run these containers, do we need some containerization platforms or softwares? To build these containers or to run these containers, to ship these containers, we need a containerization platform or software. So what are the containerization softwares? What are these containerization softwares? Like a Docker. And is Docker is the only containerization software? No. Docker is not only containerization software. There are a lot of other. Rocket, RKT, and also Podman, and also Container D, CRIO, etc. Like these are the containerization softwares. So these containerization softwares does the isolation at what level? The hypervisor does the isolation. The hypervisor will virtualize at a hardware level. These containerization softwares like Docker, Rocket, Podman, Containerd, CRIO, whatever it is, the isolation happens at a software level, OS level. Yesterday we already discussed what is hypervisor, what is container, what is virtual machine, and all those stuff. So again, too much theory also will bore. Already we covered all these things. Just I am trying to recap. Now, to build, ship, and run my applications as a containers, do I need some containerization platform? That can be Containerd, that can be CRIO, that can be Docker, that can be Rocket? Yes. So these are the containerization platforms or softwares. Out of which one? Which is most popular and widely used containerization platform in the market? Most popular and widely used containerization platform in the market is Docker. Why? Why Docker is most popular? Docker has very good CLI and APIs to manage containers. Docker has very good CLI and APIs to manage containers. And also it's open source. It's not completely open source. It comes with two editions. Docker comes with two editions, community edition and enterprise edition. If it is a community edition, do I need to pay any money if I want to use Docker? No need to pay any money if I want to use Docker if it is a community edition. Docker comes with two editions, community edition as well as enterprise edition. So if I use enterprise edition, it's a chargeable. There will be a support from Docker also. Some additional features also will be part of enterprise edition. There will be a support also from Docker company. When it comes to community edition, it's free to use. No need to pay. And it has very good CLIs and APIs to manage the containers and images. It's widely used containerization platform in the market. You go to any project, if they are saying we are building and deploying applications as a containers, what is the first term they will say? We are using Docker. We are using Docker to build the images and deploy the containers. They will say we are using Docker. So as I already told, Docker is containerization platform. Docker is a containerization platform. Using Docker, we can I create my package? Can I create my application as a package with all its dependencies together, including softwares, libraries, configurations, everything? Yes. So Docker is a containerization platform which packages your application and all its dependencies together in the form of containers. So your application works seamlessly in any environment, whether it's a dev environment or test environment or prod environment. It works seamlessly in any environment. And Docker is an open source platform. Docker is an open source platform, as I already told. It has a free edition, enterprise edition also. Docker is an open source platform for developers and system administrators. It's open platform for developers and system administrators like DevOps engineers. Developers and DevOps engineers can use Docker to build, ship. What is the meaning of ship? Ship is nothing but moving from one server, one server to other server, or one location to other location. So Docker is an open platform for developers and system admins to build and ship, run the applications as a containers. As I already told, Docker is available in two editions. One is CE. What is CE? Community edition. Another one is enterprise edition. So community edition is free to use, enterprise edition is we have to pay and use, chargeable. Now, when I am using Docker, we are going to build and deploy our applications as a containers. So that package looks like this. The whatever package we are going to create using Docker, whatever package we are going to create using Docker. So in that package, we will have application code and its dependencies like required softwares and libraries also, like JDK, Tomcat, whatever libraries and its dependencies in application code. So wherever I deploy this package, again, do we have all these things wherever I deploy this package as a container? In that container, again, do we have all these things? If this package has a Java software, if this package have a Java software and Tomcat software and my application code, wherever I deploy this Docker package, in that package, in that container, again, do I have these softwares, same code? Yes. But does this package contains complete operating system? Does this container contains complete operating system? No. It is going to have just bare minimal container OS. It is not a complete operating system. Bare minimal container OS, which means just the just required libraries to interact with kernel. Just required OS libraries to interact with kernel, to interact with host kernel, bare minimal container libraries, bare minimal container OS libraries will be part of it, not full-blown operating system. Do we need some libraries? Do we need some libraries to interact with host system kernel? Yes. So those libraries only, those libraries like a container OS, not full OS, like a small OS. It is required to interact with kernel. Now, as I already told yesterday, this Docker is just an interface between your kernel and your process, your container. So, is Docker is using underlying namespaces concept and C groups concept to manage or isolate these containers? Yes. So namespaces and C group. C group is nothing but a control group. Using control group, can I allocate CPU memories? How much CPU, how much memory can be used by that process or by that container using C groups concept? Yes. Which means, can I allocate how much CPU, how much memory that container can take when I am using Docker? Docker is internally control that using C groups. And also, is each container is going to be created in a separate process area, PID, separate network area, separate storage area, that is MNT space. That way, is it isolated from other process, other container in the same machine? Yes. So that is what Docker is doing in the background. That is what Docker is doing in the background. Why containers? Before we start using containers, why containers? Why developer will care? Why developer will prefer containers? Why operations team like DevOps team? Why we prefer containers? Why developer care? Why IT cares? IT in the sense operations team. Because as a developer, will I able to quickly create ready to run packaged applications? Will I able to quickly create and ready to run packages? I can quickly create and deploy my applications as a containers. Can I also automate testing, integration, packaging, CI, continuous integration? Even though I am using Docker, using Jenkins, can I do this continuous integration? Whenever there is a change in the code using CI, will I able to create a Docker images using CI? Will I able to deploy those Docker images as a containers using CI? Instead of you are manually building and deploying, can I automate that integration, packaging and deploying using pipelines also? Even though I am using containers, I am using Docker. Yes. So will it reduce will it reduce or eliminate that platform compatibility issues if I am using these containers, Docker? It works in dev, it won't work in prod like that. Because let's consider this as one container. I already packaged everything which is required to run my application in this container. Whether this container is running in your local laptop, whether your container is running in somewhere else, whatever we packaged in this container, will it be changed? Will it be different? No. So that way, can I reduce? Can I reduce or completely can I eliminate platform compatibility issues? Yes. And also containers. Containers is the best way to run microservices. Microservice is different, container is different. Microservice is different, container is different. But if you are using microservices, your application is being developed as a microservices, what is the best way to run our microservices is containers. The best way to run microservices is containers. Microservice is different, container is different. But what is the best way or best place to run your microservices is containers. What is microservice? What is monolithic? We will discuss later. Maybe down the line, another 4 or 5 classes, the topic will come. What is microservice? What is monolithic? We will discuss that. First, understand this container. Later, we will understand what is microservice. Now, why nowadays containers are so popular? Why nowadays Docker and Kubernetes is so popular? If you are already developer, if you are already developer or you are a tester, you are already in IT, go and ask your leads or managers, is our application is developed using microservice architecture or monolithic architecture? From last 6 7 years, any project you take, in which architecture the applications are being developed by the developers? From last 5 6 years, if you ask any developer, any lead, any manager, if you go and ask, the applications are being developed in a microservice architecture. More people are adapting to microservices. If people are adapting to microservices, they are adapting to containers. They are also adapting to containers, which means they are developing the applications as microservices and they are also adapting to containers to run those microservices. So that's why there is a huge demand for people who knows containers and container orchestration softwares. Container softwares like Docker and container orchestration softwares like Docker Swarm or Kubernetes, the guys who know these two, there is a huge demand in the market. because of the trend. Now, let's also see why IT cares. What is the meaning of IT? This operations team. This operations team like DevOps engineers or administrators. If I am using containers, can I improve the speed and frequency of deployments? Frequency in the sense, will I able to deploy very frequently if I am building as a containers? Can I improve the speed also? How come? Because if I am using containers in my application servers, do I need to install required softwares first? If I am using containers, do I need to install required softwares if I am using containers? Suppose I am trying to run Java based application. I want to run Java based application. I want to run a jar file as a container or var file as a container. Do you think I need to install Java software, Tomcat software in that server directly? No, not required. What is the only software which is required in that server in which I want to run that as a container? Docker. So if I already have a package, this package itself has the Java software, Tomcat software, my application code. Using Docker, can I run that package as a container? Do I need to manually install required softwares in that server like Java software, Tomcat software? Do I need to configure those things? No. So you already have a package. That package has everything. That's what I told here. That's what I told here. Container contains everything which is required to run your software, your application. Application code, softwares, libraries, all those things. So I no need to manually install anything except Docker. Except Docker. So with that, will I able to improve the speed and frequency of my deployments if I am using containers? And also, can I make my application lifecycle efficient and consistent, and repeatable? Repeatable. Configure once, run many times. Configure once, run many times. Which means, can I create a kind of a pipeline? Can I configure one pipeline? Whenever there is a change in that code, that pipeline can create a Docker package. That pipeline can deploy that package. So, can I make my application lifecycle efficient, consistent, and repeatable? Configure once and run many times. Whenever there is a change, that pipeline can do all the stuff. And also, will it eliminate this environment inconsistencies between development, test environment, production environment? Again, as an operations team also, we need to worry about that. So it will eliminate. Now, improve the production application resiliency and scale in and scale out. Scale in and scale out. What is the meaning of scale in and scale out? Let's say I deployed my application as one container. I deployed my application as one container. There is a lot of load on this application. If required, can I scale it to one more container? Can I scale it to another container like this? Based on the load, will I able to increase and decrease the number of replicas, number of containers where my application is running? Because of this, we prefer containers. We prefer containers. The advantages. As I already told, Docker is what type of tool? As I already told, Docker is containerization tool. Containerization tool. Containerization tool. Vendor. Who is the vendor, or who is the owner, or who is the creator of this Docker software? The company itself is Docker. The company itself is Docker. But recently, one company called Miarents, one company called Miarents has acquired Docker. One company called Miarents has acquired Docker. So the vendor is Docker. So this is the official website of Docker. This is the official website of Docker. docker.com. This is the official website of Docker. So it has all the documentation like how many applications are using Docker, how many people are using Docker, like they're giving all the details. What is Docker? Why do we need Docker? Like there is a separate blog also if you want to see what is Docker, how to use Docker, all those things you can understand here itself. This is the official website of Docker, www.docker.com. Is it an open source? Is it an open source as I already told? Yes, some extent. Some extent. Why I am saying some extent? Because it has two editions. Because it has two editions, community edition and enterprise edition. Community edition is free to use, enterprise edition is commercial, chargeable. So operating system, cross platform, what does it mean? Operating system cross platform, what does it mean? Docker, does Docker can be installed in any operating system, in any OS? Yes, Docker can be installed in Linux, Docker can be installed in Windows, Docker can be installed in Mac also, in MacBook also. Now, the benefits of Docker. The benefits of Docker. We already discussed, but again, portable. What is the meaning of portable? Will I able to port my container? Will I able to move my container from one system to another system easily? And also cost saving. Why it is cost saving? Will I able to utilize my system resources more efficiently than virtualized deployment? Will I able to utilize my system resources more efficiently compared to the virtual deployment? In containerized deployment, I can utilize my system resources more efficiently. Cost saving. Do I need to have a multiple operating systems to run multiple containers? Not required. And also scalable. As I already told, instead of one container, one replica, if required, can I scale it to 2 replicas, 3 replicas for that application? Yes. Will I able to quickly start and stop that application, that container? Yes. Will I able to quickly deploy, lightweight, easy to monitor and secure? Lightweight. What is the meaning of lightweight? Does containers take huge system resources like CPU and memory? No. Easy to monitor and secure. So these are the benefits. Now, Docker can be installed in Linux, Docker can be installed in Windows, Docker can be installed in MacBook also. But in most of the cases, in which environment we will deploy our applications? Linux. Linux. But as a developer, you want to do something locally. As a DevOps engineer, you want to do something locally using Docker. Is it possible for us to install Docker for Mac, Docker for Windows locally? As a developer, as a DevOps engineer also? Yes. Yes, you can install in Mac, you can install in Windows also if required. But before I install Docker, let's understand the architecture. Let's understand the architecture, the Docker architecture before I install. So in this diagram, you can see three important components in the architecture, Docker architecture. What are those three? These three important components in the Docker architecture. These three are important components as part of the architecture. So the moment I install Docker, there are two things. There are two things. One is client, Docker client, Docker client. The moment I install Docker, let's say I have one server. Let's say this is one server. This is one, one machine. This can be a virtual machine or physical machine. That doesn't matter for me here. So I have some operating system. Let's say I have some operating system. Let's say Ubuntu. Let's say now I can install Docker here. I can install Docker here. So there are two things here. One is Docker client, and Docker daemon, or I can say Docker host or Docker server. All are same. Docker client, Docker daemon. This is one component, Docker client, and Docker daemon or Docker host or Docker server. So what is this Docker client? It's basically CLI. What is the meaning of CLI? What is the meaning of CLI? The command line interface. Command line interface. Command line interface. So I have a Docker daemon. Docker daemon. I install Docker. Docker has two components here. Docker has two components. Docker daemon or Docker host. All are same, guys. Don't get confused. Node, server, all are same. Okay, don't get confused. Now I have a one more component called client, Docker client. So what is Docker client? What is the use of this Docker client? So if I want to do anything in Docker, that can be creating a Docker image or creating a Docker container, pushing the Docker image or pulling the Docker image, that can be done with the help of Docker daemon. But how I can interact with the Docker daemon? How I can interact or how I can instruct this Docker daemon to do so and so task, that can be done with the help of client, through the client. So Docker client is basically command line interface using which user. What is the meaning of user? This user is not like a end user. The user here is the user of Docker. That can be a developer, that can be a DevOps engineer, that can be a Jenkins process, anything. This user is not a end user. End user is not going to directly use Docker. As a developer or as a DevOps engineer or as a Jenkins process, if I want to interact with the Docker, can I use Docker CLI, Docker client, so that I can interact with the Docker daemon and do something in the Docker? Yes. So using Docker client, we can send the commands or instructions to the Docker. Using this client, we can send commands or instructions to the Docker. So what is Docker daemon? What is this Docker daemon? So the Docker daemon is basically a software. The Docker daemon is basically a software or process. Basically, the Docker daemon is a software. So Docker daemon will execute the commands sent by the CLI. That commands can be pulling an image from the registry or creating a container or creating a image or creating a container or pulling the image from registry or pushing the images to registry. That command can be anything. So who is going to actually process the instructions, the commands which we are executing with the help of client? This Docker daemon. This Docker daemon. Now we have one more component called registry. We have one more component called registry. What is registry? In general, you already know registry. We already know registry. Registry. Registry, or let me say artifactory, both are same. Registry or artifactory. So what is registry? There are two things here: registry, repository. Is both are same? Is registry, repository both are same, or both are two different things? This is also very, very important interview question. In the interviews also they will ask what is difference between Docker registry and Docker repository. So both are different, right? What is registry? Registry, it's a central storage, it's a central server or storage where we can create multiple repositories. It's a central storage, it's a central server where we can create multiple repositories to store artifacts, artifacts, to store artifacts. So example for registries, Nexus is registry, JFrog is registry, like this. JFrog is registry like this. So what is Docker registry? What is Docker registry? The Docker registry is basically, again, it's a central server where we can create multiple repository to store what? What do we store in the Docker registry? What do we store in the Docker registry? Docker images. So Docker registry is nothing but, again, it's a central server. It's a central server where we can create multiple repositories to store Docker artifacts. Docker artifacts is nothing but what? Docker artifacts is nothing but what? Docker images. Docker images. So it's a central server where we can create multiple repository to store Docker artifacts, Docker images. Now, examples: Docker Hub, and also can I use Nexus also as a Docker registry? If required, can I use JFrog also as a Docker registry where I can store Docker images? Can I use managed services like ECR, Elastic Container Registry in AWS, ACR, Azure Container Registry in Azure Cloud, GCR, Google Container Registry in Google Cloud? Can I call all these things as a Docker registries where I can store my Docker images? So Docker registry is a central server where we can create multiple repository to store the Docker artifacts, basically images. Example: Docker Hub, JFrog, Nexus, ECR, GCR, ACR, all those things. Now, what is repository? In simple words, registry is a collection of what? Registry, in simple words, registry is a collection of what? Collection or group of repositories. Repositories. So this registry is collection of group or collection or group of repositories. What is repository? Repository is a multiple versions. Repository, using repository, can I store multiple versions of the artifact? Same artifact, multiple version. Repository is a collection of repository is a collection of multiple versions of same artifact. Same artifact. So you already created a repository. Like when Bhaskar sir might have explained Nexus, you guys created a repository, but not Docker repository. Did you guys created Maven repositories where you guys are maintaining Maven artifacts, the Java artifacts? Like in that repository, can I store multiple versions of that jar files or var files in that repository? Yes. Repository is a collection of multiple versions of same artifact, same application, multiple versions, same application, multiple versions. Similarly, what is Docker repository? Docker registry is a central server where we can create multiple repository to store Docker images. Similarly, what is Docker repository here? Can I call this as a collection of multiple versions of same image? Can I call this as a collection of multiple versions of same image? Same Docker image, multiple versions, different versions. Docker repository. It's a multiple, or it's a collection or group of, it's a collection of multiple versions of same image, same image, same package, same package. So where can I create these repositories? Where can I create these repositories? These repositories has to be created in what? These repositories has to be created in registry. The repositories can be created in registry. Without registry, will you be able to create a repository? Like without Nexus, will you be able to create a repository? Or without JFrog, will you be able to create a repository? No, right? So repository is part of registry. Now, what is this registry? Why do we need this registry? What are we going to maintain in the Docker registry? What are we going to maintain in the Docker registry? What are we going to store in the Docker registry? Like images, your Docker images, your Docker packages. Why do we need this registry? Let's say I am one developer. Let's say I am one developer. I have Docker installed in my local laptop. I created a Docker image in my laptop. I created a Docker image in my laptop that is available locally. Will I able to deploy that Docker image in another Docker server? Image is part of my local laptop, but that image is not part of this server. How can I deploy that image in this server? Do I need this server? Do I need this image in this server if I want to deploy? Yes. So then how can I share these images? How can I share these images? That is where this registry comes, right? So can I store this image in a central server, central artifactory? Can from my laptop, can I push that image to central artifactory, central repository? From this central repository or central artifactory, can I pull that image to this server where I want to deploy that image as a container? That is what registry. That is what registry. So we have a client, we have a server, I mean to say host or daemon, we have a registry. So this Docker registry is a central repository. This registry contains various images. Docker is also having one central repository. The way Maven has one central repository, Maven central repository, Docker is also having one central repository. What is that central repository? Or sometimes in the interview also they'll ask what is Docker Hub. Sometimes in the interview they'll directly ask what is Docker Hub. What is this Docker Hub? It's a central repository. It's a central repository maintained and managed by whom? It's maintained and managed by Docker. So what do we have in this repository? What do we have in this repository? Can I find a lot of images in this repository? The base softwares, the base images, the softwares as a images. Suppose I need a Tomcat software as a Docker image. Can I find that here? Can I find that here? So this is one image. If I use this image to create a container, if I use this image to create a container, does that container will have Java software, Tomcat software up and running in that container? Yes. So Docker Hub is a central repository maintained and managed by Docker. This contains various public images. What is the meaning of public images? Anyone can use the images. Anyone can pull the images. Anyone can use the images, which is part of Docker Hub. So all the base images, public softwares are available. This Docker Hub is like a Play Store, kind of a Play Store for your mobile applications. Suppose you want to install some application in your mobile, are you going to download the apps from Play Store and install in your laptop, in your mobile? Similarly, similarly, this Docker Hub contains lot of public images. Can I pull the images from this Docker Hub and run the containers? Yes. So it's a public Docker Hub where you have most of the base images. Base images. What is the meaning of base? I am saying, why I am saying it as a base image. If I directly create a container out of this image, what will be part of that container, guys? What will be part of that container? Tomcat, Java will be there. But does my application will be part of that container if I directly deploy this container out of this image? No. My application will not be part of this one. But can I create my own image by using this as a base for my own image? Can I create my own image by using this as a base image? On top of this image, I can say, on top of this image, can I build my own image with my application code added to that image? Yes. So do we have all the public base images available in the Docker Hub? These images can be used in your Docker file to create your own image. Okay. So this is registry. Now, as part of the architecture, these are important: client, daemon, and registry. Guys, if required, can I have a client in a separate server? Remote Docker client. What does it mean? Remote Docker client. Only client in a separate laptop or server. The Docker daemon is running in a separate server. Is it possible for me to communicate from this separate machine to this machine? Client is in separate machine. The daemon is in separate machine. Is that possible? Yes, that is also possible. You can have a client and a daemon in a same machine, client in a separate machine. This daemon is running in a separate machine. That is also possible if required. Okay. Now, this architecture is important. Is everyone clear on this architecture? What is Docker client? What is Docker host? What is Docker registry? Why do we need registry? All these things. Guys, if you know these concepts, learning Docker will be very easy. You no need to by heart commands. You no need to by heart step one do this, step two do this. If you know the background, if you know the concepts very well, learning the actual implementation will be very easy. Now, before I install Docker, let me explain some key words or key terminologies. Docker key terminologies, which you might have frequently heard. Even though you are not working in Docker, at least you might heard about Dockerfile. Did anyone heard about Dockerfile? At least the name. Dockerfile, Docker image, Docker container, like that. So even though you are not working, at least you might have heard about this one. If you are already in IT, if you are already in IT, you might at least heard about Docker file, Docker image, the names at least. So what is this Docker file? What is this Docker image? What is container? What is volume? What is swarm? This we will discuss later. But let me explain key important concept here. Docker image. Docker image. What is image? What is this Docker image? It's a package, guys. Docker image is a package. It's a package. The way we have a packages in Java, do we have a jar, do we have a var or zip that as a packages like var, jar, ear as packages? This Docker image is also a package. So Docker image is a lightweight standalone. What is the meaning of standalone? It contains, it can run on its own. It can run on its own, right? It's a lightweight standalone executable package. This Docker image is nothing but a package. What that package contains, as I already told, the Docker package, the Docker image contains everything which is required to run a piece of software. Everything which is required to run a piece of software, which means in the Docker package, can I have my application code, required software, required runtime softwares, libraries, environment variables, config files, everything. Docker package or Docker image contains everything which is required to run your software, like application code, libraries, environment variables, config files, all these things. So this is a Docker package, Docker image. In AWS, we have a AMI. Just to give an example, in AWS, you have a AMI. What is the AMI? What is the full form of AMI? Amazon Machine Image, right? So when I discuss AWS also, I told AMI. What is AMI? Amazon Machine Image. Amazon Machine Image. It's a pre-configured package. It's a pre-configured package, Amazon Machine Image, that contains everything to create a EC2 instance. Does that AMI contains complete operating system, full OS, complete operating system and some softwares like that? That is required to create a EC2. If I want to create a container, what is required? If I want to create a container, what is required? If I want to create a container, what is required? I need a Docker image. I need a Docker image. So if I create some Docker image, if I create some Docker image by adding all my application code, by having all my required softwares, configuration files, environment variables, with all these things, if I create a Docker image, if that image, wherever I deploy that image, in that container, will I have whatever is part of my image? Does that container will have whatever part of my image wherever I create that? Yes. This image is different. Docker image is different. AMI is different. Just I am using these two to relate. Using Docker image, can I create a EC2 instances, servers? Using Docker image, can I create EC2 instances? No. Using AMI, can I create a containers? No. Both are two different things. So this Docker image like a package which contains everything for you to run. Just to simple to say, this Docker image is like a everything except operating system, except OS. Everything which is required to run your application except OS, except OS. So is it going to use the host system kernel? Is it going to use the host system kernel when I deploy this package? Yes. So this is Docker image. Now, how can I create a Docker image? How can I create a Docker image? How I can create this Docker image? That Docker image can be created using with the help of Docker file. With the help of Docker file, I can create a Docker image. So Docker file is one file. Just to make it simple, you are creating a jar file, var file using Maven. What is the file which is internally used to create that jar file, var file if you are using Maven? Palm.xml, right? Using palm.xml, are you guys creating a jar file, var file, AR file? Similarly, if I want to create a Docker image, what is the file? What is the input for you to create a Docker image? What is the input for you to create a Docker image? Docker file. So Docker file is a file. It will describe the steps in order to create image quickly. So who will process the instructions which is defined in the Docker file? The Docker daemon. The Docker daemon will run the instructions in the Docker file and it will create a image. Simple to say, Docker file. Can I call this Docker file as a source code of the Docker image? Which means the Docker image is created using Docker file. Now, if I just have an image, does it mean my application or my process will be running? If I just create a package, does it mean my application will be running? If I just create this image, if I just have an image, does it mean my process is running? No. So for that to happen, we need to create a container. We need to create a container. We need to create a container. You need to create a container. So this is typical Docker flow. This is typical Docker flow. With the help of Docker file, what I can build, as I already told, using Docker, I can build, I can ship, and I can run my applications as a container. The definition we learned Docker. Using Docker, I can build, I can ship, I can run my applications as a containers. So with the help of Docker file, can I build image, Docker image with whatever required softwares, whatever application code, with a bare minimal container operating system. As I already told, does containers will have a full-blown operating system? No. Containers will not have operating system. Instead of this term, container operating system, the best way I can say is just a libraries to interact with kernel. Instead of calling this as a container operating system, I can say it's just a libraries to interact with host system kernel. So with the help of this Docker file, can I build an image as per my requirement? As per my requirement, can I build an image with whatever software I wanted to be part of that image? As per my requirement, can I build an image, whatever software should be part of that image, and whatever application code should be part of that image? Can I build the image as per my requirement? Yes. Now, if you see, this is some simple Docker file. This is some simple Docker file. In detail, we will learn Docker file later. Just to make you understand, I am taking this as an example. This is my Docker file. With the help of this Docker file, I am building the image. With the help of this Docker file, I am building the image. So what do we have in that image? If this is my Docker file, what is this? Can I call this as a base image? Can I call this as a base image, which is part of Docker Hub? So what I will be getting from that base image? Tomcat and Java software. Tomcat and Java software with the minimal container libraries. On top of that base image, what I am trying to do with this one more instruction in my Docker file, I am going to get Java software as well as Tomcat software from this base image. On top of that base image, what we are trying to do? We are trying to copy our application into web apps folder. But where is this? Where this Tomcat is there? Is this Tomcat is coming from this base image? Do I have this Tomcat is part of this base image? Yes. So with the help of this Docker file, let's say if I create an image, does that image contains required softwares to run my application and also application code? Yes. This is my package. This is my package. Now this image, can I run this image locally? Locally in the sense, in the server where you have created image, can I run this image locally also if required? In the server where I have created image, that can be your local laptop or desktop. Otherwise, I don't want to run this locally. I ran locally, it is working fine. I want to deploy in a different server, maybe dev server, QA server, prod server. Then how can I move this image? How can I move this image from one server to another server? How can I ship? Not via SCP, not via SCP, via registry. This is not a normal file. It is not via SCP, via registry. This is not a normal file. Now I have created this image. Can I push this image to some repository, central repository, using Docker push commands? Now, suppose I want to deploy that application as a container in a different server. Can I pull the image and create a container? Can I pull the image and create a container? Not via SCP, via registry you can do that. Now, if I run that image, what I will be getting, guys? You can run that image locally or you can run that image in any server also. So what I will be getting if I run that image? I will be getting a container. So container. So what is part of this container? Does my application will be up and running in this container? Container is basically runtime process. Container is basically runtime process of your image. So your process will be started. Your Java process, your Tomcat process will be started if I just create a container. So it's a runtime process of your image. Is everyone clear? The typical Docker flow. If you understand this flow, you can understand Docker very well. From the image, you can create, from the Docker file, you can create image. From the image, you can create a container. Can I store these images? Can I store these images centrally via registry concept? Using registry concept, can I store, can I share these images with any team, any developer, any QA team, any DevOps team, right? Anyone in the project? Yes, that is registry. Now, how to write Docker file, how to create Docker images, we will understand slowly. So this is not the final day of Docker, but understand the concept. What is Docker file? What is image? What is container? Typical Docker flow goes like this. Advantages I already covered. I don't want to waste much time again. Advantages I already covered. I don't want to waste much time. Rapid application deployment. Can I rapidly deploy? Rapidly in the sense quickly. Can I quickly deploy my applications? Because the containers include minimum requirements of your application, right? It will have a softwares, libraries, all those things. Will I able to allow, will it allow me to quickly deploy? Because the size of the package is also less. the size of the package, the Docker image size is also less. I can quickly deploy. And also portability across machines. Portability across machines. Application and all its dependencies are bundled. Applications and all its dependencies are bundled into a single container. I mean to say that package image. So that is independent from the host system kernel or host system operating system or kernel. So will I able to deploy that image as a container irrespective of the host system, irrespective of the kernel of that host system? What does it mean? I created a Docker image by installing Docker in my local laptop. Can that image can be run as a container in Linux? If it is a Red Hat OS or Ubuntu OS, CentOS, that doesn't matter. Irrespective of the host kernel, will I able to run this images? Yes. So can we achieve portability across machines, which means will I able to run these images wherever there is a Docker? Yes. And also version control and component reuse. Version control and component reuse, which means in my registries, in my repositories, can I maintain multiple versions of that image whenever there is a change in the code? Whenever there is a change in the code, I am creating one image. I am going to, whenever there is a change in the code, I am going to tag that image with version 1. I can maintain that image in the repository. Again, there is a change in my code. Can I create a one more image for that application by tagging version as 2? Can I store both images in the repository? Now, if something goes wrong with the latest code, latest image is not working, latest code is not working as expected, can I revert? Can I delete that container and again recreate a container with old image, the previous image, whatever it was working fine? So version control and component reuse. And also, can I share my images using that remote repository concept? That remote repository concept? Yes. And also lightweight, minimal overhead. Lightweight and minimal overhead, which means the Docker images are typically very small. Will it take a lot of computing resources from the underlying host? No. With the help of Docker, we can achieve simplified maintenance also. Simplified maintenance also. What does it mean? Docker will reduce effort and risk of the problems with application dependencies. Okay. Multiple containerized applications. As I already told, can I deploy multiple applications as a containers on a single server? And again, will they mess up with each other? Will they mess up with each other? No. If there is a change in your application, if there is a change in your application, you are updating your application code, then what you need to do to deploy that new code? If there is a change in your application code is getting modified, what you need to do? You need to create a new image, and out of that new image, what needs to be done? Out of that new image, can I create a new container, that fresh container, that new container out of that image? And I no need to worry about other applications which is running on that machine, other containers which is running on that machine. I no need to worry, because is it going to break other applications, other containers which is running in that machine if I do this? No. So will it simplify the maintenance and risk of managing multiple applications as a containers, it will reduce. Self-sufficient. Self-sufficient. What is the meaning of self-sufficient? Is it having everything? Self-sufficient. Does Docker containers can have everything what is required to run? Minimal container libraries to interact with kernel, softwares and application frameworks, application code also. As I already told, does Docker container should be able to run anywhere the Docker can run? Wherever you have a Docker, can we run that container? Docker container? Yes. As I already told, Docker shines for a microservice architecture. Docker shines for a microservice architecture. Microservices are different, containers are different. That's why I have given a note here. Containers are not required to implement microservices, which means it is not mandatory to deploy your microservices as containers. It is not mandatory to deploy your microservices as containers, but they are perfectly suited. They are perfectly suited to run microservices as a containers. It's a perfect place to run your microservice is a container. These are the advantages of containers, right? Now, let me install Docker. Let me install Docker. Guys, I repeat, I know I am requesting again, I am saying again, this is very, very important. I want you to attend all these sessions and I want you to go through the recordings multiple times. You guys watch the comedy shows multiple times in YouTube, right? Similarly, I want you to do this. You consider this as a, if you are from Andhra or Telangana, consider this Docker sessions as a Jabardast or extra Jabardast comedy shows. You guys multiple times watch, right? Similarly, consider my sessions as that and watch so that you can understand. This is very, very important. I am trying to cover in depth. If I try to explain at high level by taking one sample application without explaining how it is working in the background, I can create image. Without explaining how it is going to work in the background, I can create a container, but that may not help you to survive in this competition world. So that's why I'm going in depth. So you might be feeling, what is Balaji sir is teaching? I don't understand anything. You might feel like that, I agree. But watch the same video 2-3 times and come back to me. You can understand the impact. If you go through the video 2-3 times and come back to me, you can understand the impact. How, what is this? Why we are teaching this much level? Now, let me install Docker. As I already told, does Docker can be installed in Windows also, in your local laptop also if required? Yes. But there should be some prerequisites. There should be some prerequisite in your Windows laptop. So, Docker for Windows. What is the prerequisite in your Windows laptop or desktop which you are using? Either you need to have a WSL2 backend with a Windows 11 64-bit, Windows 10 64-bit. What is the minimum memory required in your Windows laptop or desktop if you want to install? 4 GB, and it is 64-bit processor. Does 32-bit processor will be supported? No. Otherwise, you need to have a Hyper-V enabled. Hyper-V enabled. Why Hyper-V has to be enabled? I will tell you. There are two types of containers here. There are two types of containers. One is Linux containers. Linux containers. Another one is Windows containers. Linux containers and Windows containers. What is the meaning of Windows containers? What is the meaning of Linux containers? If you are trying to run any Microsoft based softwares, You are trying to use any Microsoft based softwares. So Microsoft is required, or Microsoft is promoting their operating system. Most of the Microsoft softwares will run on which OS? Not everything, not everything, not all the Microsoft softwares, but few Microsoft softwares requires Windows OS. So if I want to containerize that Microsoft based applications also, can I containerize using Linux containers as Linux base? No, right? So in that case, I need to build as a I need to build as what? Windows containers by using Windows libraries. By using Windows libraries in my base image, by using Windows base images, Windows libraries as a base images, I can build that applications as containers. Now, if I am building Windows based containers, can I run these Windows based containers in the Docker which is installed in Linux operating system? Can I run these Windows based containers where the Docker is installed on top of Linux OS? No, no. But is Windows containers are widely used nowadays? Is Windows containers are widely used nowadays? No, no one is using Windows containers. 99.99%. What type of containers, what type of environment we will use? Basically Linux, Linux based containers. So now I want to run Linux based containers in the Docker which is installed in Windows. Is that possible? I want to run Linux based containers in the Docker which is installed in Windows. Is that possible? Yes. Yes. How? I will tell you. What is the prerequisite they are saying? If you want to install Docker for Windows, you need to enable Hyper-V. Why they are saying enable Hyper-V? What is Hyper-V? As I already told, is Hyper-V is a type 2 hypervisor software. So why they are saying Hyper-V has to be enabled if you want to install in Windows? Now you have this Windows laptop. You have this Windows laptop or desktop. If you enable Hyper-V, when you are installing Docker, what will happen in the background? Is it going to create one VM within your Windows system? Yes. It is going to create one VM, one virtual machine, one virtual machine. On top of that virtual machine, Docker will be installed in your Windows laptop. In your Windows laptop, that can be do this way. Now, if I don't want to run Linux based containers, do I have an option to switch Windows containers? The Docker which is installed in Windows, can I switch between Linux containers and Windows containers? If I switch to Windows containers, do I need this additional Linux VM in my Windows laptop? If I switch to Windows containers, not required. If you switch to Windows containers, this additional VM is not required, because is that Windows containers will be using this Windows operating system which is part of your Windows laptop or server. Yes, that is how it works here. Now someone was asking, can I use VMware? Yes, you can use VMware. You install VMware, you create one virtual machine using that VMware, then you can install Docker. That is not required. If you have enabled Hyper-V, can you directly do that? Can you directly install Docker in Windows? Docker in Windows. But if you install VMware, is it like a Docker in Windows or Docker in Linux? If you install VMware and install Docker, is it a Docker in Windows or Docker in Linux? It's not going to be Docker in Windows. If you are using VMware, right? Using VMware software, you are creating one virtual machine. So do I need to install Docker here directly in my Windows system? This is host system. No. You are going to go inside this VM and install. So will it be a Docker for Windows or Docker in Windows, or will it be a Docker in Linux? If you install VMware, Oracle VirtualBox, all those things, that is like Docker in Linux only. Without doing this also, can I install directly Docker in Windows, Docker for Windows by enabling Hyper-V? Yes. So if I install Docker for Windows, do I have an option to switch between Windows containers and Linux containers? If I choose Linux containers, by default, that is what by default. If I choose Linux containers, can I run the containers in Windows system even though I created using Linux base? Yes. That is what Docker for Windows. Now, if required, can I install Docker for Mac also? MacBook, Mac operating system? Yes. But for Mac, Mac is already built on top of Linux only. Mac is already built on top of Linux only. Do I need to have any hypervisors or any Hyper-V kind of things needs to be enabled? Not required. Not required. So if you want to install locally Docker for desktop, you need to enable Hyper-V first. You need to have this operating system, Windows 11 or Windows 10, Home Edition also fine. Home Edition also fine. Hyper-V should be enabled. It should be 64-bit processor, 4 GB RAM. Now you can switch between Windows containers and Linux containers, as I already told. Now, if you install Docker in your Windows laptop, yes, Hyper-V will be supported in Home Edition also. You can do that. If you install Docker, you see something like this, Docker desktop. You can click on that and stop and start Docker. So if you install Docker for desktop, you can practice Docker in local, but I don't recommend that. I'm not going to install Docker locally. I'm not going to install Docker locally. I'm going to install directly in the VMs. So which means, can I create some VM that can be in my own data center? If you are using your own data center on-premise infrastructure, or if you are using cloud, can I create some EC2 instances and install Docker in Linux? Yes. So I will install Docker in Linux. I'll not install Docker for desktop. We don't practice locally because it takes a lot of CPU and memory, this Docker in your Windows. Your laptop becomes slow. I don't want to use this one because let's use with actual environment, live environment. But as a developer, once you joined into the project as a DevOps engineer, if required to do something, some kind of a POC locally, you don't have any Linux servers to do POC, then can you install Docker in your local laptop and do some kind of a POC as a developer, as a DevOps engineer also? Yes. For POC purpose only. But for actual build and deployment purposes, are you going to build locally and run actual build and deployments? No, that will be in actual servers. Now, let me do that. Now everyone has a AWS account. Now we don't have any on-premise data centers. So can I create a server and install Docker in cloud also? Yes. If you have your own data center, can you connect to that server and install Docker in the data center server also if required? Yes. Now, let me create a server. Again, Docker Community Edition we are going to install. It supports most of the Linux distributions except Red Hat. Except Red Hat. Why? Why Docker Community Edition is not supported by Red Hat? Which means Docker is not officially supporting. and at the same time Red Hat also not officially supporting the Docker Community Edition, because Red Hat is enterprise Linux. Red Hat has its own containerization software. Red Hat is having their own containerization software. What is that? Containerization software. They have their own containerization software called Podman. So this Podman is again one containerization software. So who implemented this Podman containerization software? Basically Red Hat. Now Red Hat is acquired by IBM, so I can say IBM now. So Red Hat was acquired by IBM. So they have its own containerization software. So they want to promote their own containerization software, right? So Community Edition officially not supported by Red Hat, but which doesn't mean you can't install Docker in Red Hat. We can still install Docker. We can still install Docker in Red Hat, but is there any official support whenever there are any issues occurring using Docker with Red Hat? Is there any official support? No. Community Edition? No. But if I am using Enterprise Edition, can it be installed in Red Hat also? Enterprise Edition, it supports, because you are paying the money. So it supports Red Hat also. So in Community Edition also, as I told, nothing will stop you to install Docker in Red Hat, but will it officially supported either by Red Hat or Docker? No. So that's why we are not going to use Red Hat. So instead of Red Hat, I can go with Ubuntu. Again, whether I am using Ubuntu, whether I am using Red Hat, whether I am using CentOS, whether I am using Docker in Windows, does the concept of Dockers will change? Based on the operating system, does the concept of Docker will change? No, it's same. So let me create one server to install Docker now. Let me create one server to install Docker. If required, you can install in Amazon Linux. If required, you can install in Red Hat also, but no official support. Instead of that, I am taking this AMI. What is this AMI? Ubuntu Server 20 LTS. What type of operating system is this? It's again Linux only. Which distribution? Which flavor? Ubuntu flavor. Whether it's a Ubuntu or Red Hat or CentOS, it's just a wrapper around kernel. It's just a wrapper around kernel. Whether it's a Ubuntu, whether it's a Red Hat, whether it's a CentOS, in the background, it's just a wrapper around kernel. So I'm using this Ubuntu operating system. Now, just for practicing, I can take t2.micro server. Sometimes in the interview also they are asking question, how many containers can be created in one server? How many containers can be created in one server, in one Docker server? Is there any answer for this? If let's consider this is interview, and I am asking this question, what is the answer for this? How many containers can be created in one Docker server? That depends on what? That depends on the system resources. That depends on system resources. What is the meaning of system or host? System or host or server? Wherever you have Docker installed, in that system resources. What is the meaning of resources? Like CPU, memory. So if I am creating this type of instance, 1 GB RAM and 1 core processor, will I able to create tens of containers, hundreds of containers in this machine? No. But if I take some high configuration server, let's say this one, 128 GB RAM, 128 GB RAM and 64 core processor, will I able to create maybe 30 containers, 40 containers, 50 containers also if required? Yes. But again, based on the instance type, based on the operating system, or based on the infrastructure, whether you are using Azure cloud or AWS cloud or GCP cloud or your own data center server, does the concept of these Dockers will change again based on the operating system, based on the infrastructure you are using? No, everything remains same. So is everyone clear? How many instances, how many containers can be created in one Docker server? That depends on your system resources, your host machine resources, based on the CPU memory available in your host. Now I am selecting this one just for practicing purpose. I am creating in the default VPC. Again, back to default VPC. I am creating again in the default VPC in public subnets only. Back to default VPC. Now let me tag this as Docker server. Now, if required, using user data also, can I execute some commands which can install Docker in that server using user data also? If required, you can do that. Now, I have not done that. Can I SSH to this server and install Docker software? Yes. It will take some time. Let's wait. Let's wait. How to install Docker? There are plenty of ways. There are plenty of ways. You can follow official website also. Install Docker. This is the official website. Official website. So if you want to install for MacBook, Windows, this. If you want to install for Linux, so you can follow this instruction like CentOS. If you see this Red Hat or Ubuntu like this, I can click on this one. So they are saying OS requirements, all these things. If you have any old versions, if you have any old versions, you can remove by executing this command. Now you can install in different ways. You can install using the Linux repositories like apt, like this. Execute this command, then do this. It will install like this. Otherwise, there are simple approaches also. There are simple approaches also. Something like this: sudo curl -f ssl get.docker.com. This get.docker.com. So what is this get.docker.com? What is this get.docker.com? Basically, it's a shell script. Who written this shell script? Who written this shell script? This is written by Docker as a company. Docker as a company. This is written. So can I use this script also to install Docker in Linux? This works only for Linux. Most of the operating system except which one? Except which one? Except Red Hat. So what I am trying to do using this command, I am getting the content of that script. I am getting the content of that script. Then what I am doing? I am passing it to this is Linux only, nothing rocket science. I am getting the content of that script. I am passing it to bash shell. So is the bash is going to execute that script, whatever I am getting. Otherwise, can you save this into one script like this also? Can you save this into one script like this also? -o like this, install docker.sh like this, and again execute. You can do that. Otherwise, I am doing this way directly. This is one way. Otherwise, can I install directly using package manager also if it is Ubuntu? What is the package manager, guys? apt install docker.io, something like this. I can install like this. Now let me connect to that server. Let me connect to this server. Guys, what is the username? If it is Ubuntu server, what is the default username, guys? It's not EC2 user. It's not EC2 user. It's a Ubuntu user. So let me connect to that server. Now, do I have a Docker installed in this machine as of now? Is this Docker commands are working as of now? No. So can I install like this using package manager? Yes. But this is saying no installation candidate. Do I need to update the package manager first? Sudo apt update. Because it's a Ubuntu machine. Apt update I can do this way and install. Otherwise, can I directly run this command? Can I directly run this command also if required? The script does the same thing. So Docker is installed. Docker is installed. Now Docker is getting installed when I am executing this sudo apt install. Guys, installation is not important. If you know only installation, as I already told, you will not become a DevOps engineer. If you know only installation, because I see people are learning on that way only. You are focusing only on the installation, but you are actually ignoring the actual concept of the tool. Installation, you no need to remember anything, right? So if any website, any software you take, do have some websites, official website, whether it's a Tomcat, whether it's a Maven, whether it's a Docker, Kubernetes. So will you be able to understand what is the tool, what is the prerequisite to install the tool, how to install the tool? You have a documents. You no need to focus on that one. Installation can be done in many ways, right? But actual usage is important. Why and how we are using, why we are using is important. Now Docker is installed. If you see, I am getting some error, permission denied. Why I am getting this error, permission denied? Let's check multiple things. Docker is installed. Is Docker process is started? Is Docker daemon is started? Let me check. Let me check. ps-ef grep Docker. Is Docker daemon process is running? This, what is this Docker D stands for? The Docker D stands for Docker daemon. Is that process is running? If that process is not running, you don't see that entry here. If this is not running, you don't see that entry here. PS, I am seeing the process, running process. If this is not running, will I able to see that entry here, guys? Which means is that process is running? Is the Docker daemon process is running? Since I am seeing this entry here, is the Docker daemon process is running? People still saying no. The moment I see process, it is going to see a list running process. Is Docker daemon is running? Yes. Now you can check like this also. Sudo service Docker status. Service typo. Is this Docker service is running, active and running? Yes. Then what is this problem? Because as a which user I am executing this Docker commands? As a which user I am executing this Docker commands? As a normal user, non-root user. So is this user has a permissions to interact with a Docker daemon by default? No. Now, if I use sudo, am I getting the details? If I use sudo, as a which user that command will be executed? Root user. But as a normal user, if I am executing as a normal user, am I getting that issue, permission issues? Yes. So how to resolve this one? You need to add this user. You need to add this non-root user to the Docker group. When I install Docker, there is a group called Docker is created, already created. There is a group called Docker is already created. If I add this user, this non-root user to the Docker group, then does this user can execute commands to interact with the Docker daemon? Yes. So how to add user? How to add user? I think you already know. I no need to explain. Sudo user mode -ag. I am appending this user to this group. I am not changing the primary group. I am appending this group, this user. What this $user returns, guys? This $user returns the current user, Ubuntu. Otherwise, can I give like this also? Ubuntu. This is added, but is it going to reflect? Is it going to reflect in the same session, in the same SSH session? No. Same SSH session, it will not reflect. I need to restart the service, that SSH service, or let me exit. Let me exit from this session. Let me exit from this session. Again, if I SSH again, new session is started. Now, in this new session, will I able to see now? Am I getting that permission issues even though I am executing as a Ubuntu user? No. So, do I have a client and also do you have a server? That server is nothing but a daemon. So whatever commands I am executing here, these commands are basically, this client is going to send these commands or instructions to the server. Is server is responding with that data? Yes. So install Docker like this. I'll continue tomorrow. Okay. So theoretically, we all discussed what is Docker. From tomorrow onwards, we will take sample application, one application after the other, and we will slowly understand all the Docker concept. What is image, what is container, how to build images, what is registry, how to push images to registry. Slowly we'll understand all these commands. Okay. We'll continue tomorrow. But before coming to tomorrow's class, install Docker in one of the Ubuntu server. Thank you. I'll continue tomorrow.